We have on today one of my favorite people in the strength conditioning industry. And the reason why is because I genuinely think Eric Cressey is the perfect combination, is the best combination of know-how in the weight room and know-how from a business standpoint. And Eric and I don't know each other very well. We've met years ago and kind of, he was nice enough to keep answering texts and emails from me. And anytime I have like some kind of big question financially or anything like that, like I'm not afraid to, or even training stuff, I'm not afraid to reach out to him, and he responds super quick and always gives me super sound advice. When I went to your facility, I was super impressed with, first off, how neat and in order everything was. You guys have everything as an individualized assembly line. It's really, really impressive. Like, you have everything set down, and this was maybe 7, 8 years ago. Everything was perfectly in order. Everyone was doing what they were supposed to do at that time slot. Everything was awesome. I was super, super impressed with how you ran your ship. But as a younger coach, I was super critical of you with your programming because I didn't understand it. One of the things you had said back, and I'm sure maybe you've changed your mind, maybe you haven't, but you had said that the special exercises in the sense of mobility work should be unique to the player and to their position. Whereas the exercises, the general exercises, they don't need to be that unique because they're just general exercises. Just get them big, strong, powerlifting pitchers, but the details are in the correctives. And I said, I'm looking at this program and it seems generic outside of the correctives. And it just, I don't know, it doesn't suit me. And now that's virtually the same exact thing that I've evolved to. Now, hopefully you haven't evolved on from that, but dude, I'm so happy to have you on the show. It's honestly, it's an honor to have you on. We love it.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me. I mean, I'm flattered. So first off, thank you very much for the kind words. I think some of those perspectives have definitely evolved a little bit. I think we do the majority of our individualization in terms of what we do on the warm-up side of things. And the idea being, if you warm up to get in neutral, then you train in neutral, you tend to stay in neutral a lot better. But I do think, there's certainly a lot of things that we do within our strength and conditioning dynamic that, maybe are more refined than they were, say, 2010. Even if you look at just some of like, Bill Hartman's work with respect to, wide versus narrow infrasternal angles, being, a follower of Bill's, I think has made us appreciate that, maybe some of these guys respond differently to a lot of heavy loading and bilateral stance. So some of these guys are going to lose rotation faster if we just deadlift and squat the house all the time. So maybe we're more judicious in how often we program that, or we're, maybe more aware of minimizing volume, within the session, or following it up with other exercises. That variability that a lot of the heavy loading takes away from us. So you always look at the athlete in front of you, but I do think you always have to have a system in place that, at least provides a framework. It gives you kind of the guardrails that you can't go outside of.
Yeah. So what now, has there been anything that you've steered away from over the years?
Yeah. I mean, I was, probably the prime example would be like the sleeper stretch, right? Like, when I came up and, I was exposed to a lot of, really, really bright people in the mid 2000s. We opened our first facility in 2007 and, sleeper stretch this, sleeper stretch that. You just have to maintain shoulder internal rotation no matter what. To his credit, Neil Rampy, my buddy, who's now the head athletic trainer for the Dodgers. Congrats to Neil for just winning a World Series. But back in 2010, it's kind of a funny story. I went out to Arizona. Actually, it might have been 2009. Excuse me. Actually attended the MLB. Basically sports medicine event. At the time, it was at Athletes Performance, and basically it was a DNS course. I actually stayed at Neil's house. We went to the course together, and it was interesting because I went there for a DNS course, and it was Pavel Kolash, who's brilliant guy. As I recall, he actually had a brand new translator, and his translator just did not have kind of like a good working vibe. So the seminar to be honest, in spite of the fact that it's a remarkable philosophy, the seminar itself wasn't particularly compelling. I actually remember sitting in the back row with Mike Boyle, and both of us being like, we can tell there's good stuff here. It just didn't get related through the translation particularly well. But while I was there on that visit, Neil's guest bedroom was also his library. And so while I was staying in his guest bedroom, I looked at some of the manuals that were on the wall, and it was a bunch of Postural Restoration Institute stuff. I was like, hey, what's this? I'm not familiar with this at all. And, pretty soon he had me doing left side lying stability ball, intercostal stretches on a stability ball in his living room. And he's talking, through this planned pattern of asymmetry that's completely normal, and really blew my mind. So sure enough, after I left, I signed up for a course and, really changed my career. Just this concept of, looking at the thorax. I remember Neil using the analogy of, all my athletes are Mr. Potato Head. I just start with the potato and I add the arms and the legs afterwards. And so it made me very, kind of centrally oriented, and created kind of this proximal to distal approach that we have now. But, I looked at all these guys who, I had been struggling to try to maintain internal rotation, and, we've been sleeper stretching them till the cows came home. And then I come back from this course and we do a little bit of positional breathing, and they, they gain 30 degrees of IR without touching their shoulder. So it was very eye-opening for me. And obviously now we're learning even more that, glenohumeral internal rotation deficit probably isn't nearly as concerning as we thought. That's probably a lot more about how well you control your crazy passive external rotation, all that. But, that was something where I'm like, circa 2012, we banged it, and haven't used it since. And we've had way better results. So you always have to be willing to admit when you were wrong and go back and change. And, I try to be, humble in that regard, and always be willing to tinker with something if I don't feel like it's working well.
So with the PRI stuff, I walked down that path probably around 2012, and it was really difficult for me to implement in a group setting.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go about coaching that with these guys?
I think the first thing to remember is, and we've seen this with every discipline that's ever come out, right? We've seen it with PRI, we saw it with DNS, we've seen it with Z Health, we've seen it with, any of like these new cutting edge innovative approaches, which all have merit, right? There's always going to be people where they allow the pendulum to swing too far in one direction, they become zealots. And, I was very cognizant of that in the PRI world. And where I was fortunate is a lot of like our younger, I say younger, but like some of our interns at the time. So like Kevin Neald's now, I think, director of performance for the Boston Bruins. Kevin was the guy who went pretty far down the rabbit hole, as we were too. And so we bounced some ideas back and forth. And I know obviously Hartman and Robertson used it a lot. So it's really just an awareness of, what percentage of our overall training does this constitute? And I think what we realized is, it's a couple of positional breathing drills in our warm up. It's a little bit of awareness of how we coach the positioning on certain exercises. We're trying to find left stance more often. We're trying to add more full exhales, things along those lines. And that was for me the biggest takeaway. But when I saw people where it was completely all they did, and there was kind of like this associated tone of, hey, you're broken. You're completely asymmetrical. We can't do this, and this. I'm like, I looked at the world I deal with, which is 80+% baseball players. I'm like, their crazy asymmetry is what makes them good. Like, I don't want to just take that away. So I think we were cognizant of the fact that this was, 2 or 3% of our overall training volume, that we weren't going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We were already having a lot of success. And the last thing we wanted to do is step away from that. So what actually I think helped us is our 2011 draft class in Massachusetts was crazy. 2011 was ranked as the best draft since 1986. I mean, this is the draft where Garrett Cole went first, Trevor Bauer went third. You had, Francisco Lindor, George Springer, you had Javi Baez, all these incredible talents. And Massachusetts was actually ranked as the 5th best state in the country. So here we are, just, dumb luck in 2011, had just insane prospects everywhere. Tyler Beatty went 21st overall out of our gym. And it was actually kind of important, I think, that we had a lot of success then, because we realized that what we were doing was impactful, the synergy we had created and, across multiple disciplines underneath our roof. If that hadn't happened, I think at that time I might've been more, maybe drawn to, being really aggressive with a lot of the changes, more bold initiatives that would have gotten rid of things that were, probably really good. So as I look back on it, I think it was success at the right time to avoid us from maybe, going down the wrong play. But what's tricky about this is actually the people at PRI are wonderful. Ron Huruska is a great human being. Very open-minded, very complimentary of related disciplines. James Anderson, Mike Cantrell. They have some great instructors. It's very rarely the brightest people at the top that are driving the zealots. It's more of the people that just identify with it on a crazy level, and it becomes their way of differentiating themselves. And I don't see a need to swing so far in one direction. And when you look at the people who are doing a really great job with it, you look at like Eric Otter, who's now with the Memphis Grizzlies and doing an amazing job. And, Connor Ryan, is a physical therapist of the Phoenix Coyotes. Connor's understood that a lot of the folks who have interned for us and interned for IFAST, I think, have gotten a good appreciation for maybe, how to apply all these different things.
So you said, actually, there were some things that you were thinking about turning away from, but then that draft class and the success, what were some of those things?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, at the time you can get pulled in the direction of, before you know it, if you go really far down the PRI rabbit hole, if you're not careful and you don't have a frame of reference, like you've got an hour and a half with kids and they spend 45 minutes on the ground blowing up balloons.
Yeah.
And you and I both know, like, you give a 16-year-old kid, a balloon and, Rage Against the Machine's blowing in the background. He's just like eye rolling at you and all the balloons wind up in the, in the corner in a pile of trash. So, I think you have to just know where you're going to be and what you're going to do and, and be true to it. But at the same time, like, I've absolutely made mistakes in my career, and I think I've learned from them over the course of time, and I'm never afraid to make mistakes. But I always want to make sure that you don't overlook it and not benefit from those opportunities to learn.
So, Brooker, you go. I've been talking the whole time. Go.
Yeah, no, sorry. So, Eric, mate, I mean, you mentioned just then about your sessions are around approximately 90 minutes. Is that still the case? And how do you sort of break everything down? Because seems to me like you probably have so much that you see with different people and you want to work on so much different stuff. How do you break it all? How do you break it all down? Do you have a set system, or how does it look like?
I say 90 minutes because that will often tell like our teenage athletes to budget on. But I'll be honest, like we have players that spend 5 hours a day at our facility, and that's in part because of maybe the culture we've established. Obviously that's not ideal during COVID. Like the last thing you want to do is just, develop crowds when, we're trying to be, distancing and all that stuff. But, I think one of the things that's happened is as we've offered more, I don't want to say amenities, but offerings at our facility, we have pitching, we have hitting, we have physical therapy, we have manual therapy, we have nutrition, we have all these different revenue centers. It can be really tricky. So, as an example, like my 8:30 a.m. group, there's probably, 150 combined years of Major League Baseball service time. It's a lot of like dads that drop their kids off at school and come right to train. And those guys come in, and I'll be honest with you, like they talk about fantasy football and, they shoot the breeze for the first 10 to 12 minutes, and that's totally fine. And, it's as they're going through like their foam rolling, their SMR, stuff like that. And, then they go through warm up, and a lot of those guys go right outside to throw on the turf. After that, they come in and hit med ball, they, may have some sprint / plyos, and then they've, got a strength training session. Some of them may stick around for some manual therapy or have a physical therapy session. So it can easily be 3 hours. And it gets even more layered when you've got a position player who comes in and has all that stuff, and he has to hit, and he has to do some base running stuff, defensive drills or something like that. So, I think it really depends on whether you're talking about a pro baseball player like the last week in January, or whether we're talking about, a guy early in the off season like now, when they're probably a little bit more, expedited.
I mean, it's super impressive to see the level of structure that you have within your organization. How many people are working for you right now, and how's that all set up?
So it's interesting. I actually have to almost count them off. Let's just say this: we've been in our facility for about 10 months in Florida that we built, and we already need more office space just because of the staff that's grown so much. So, we basically have my wife and then another administrative staff member. We have a pitching coordinator, an associate pitching coordinator. We have a full-time manual therapist. We've got myself, Tim, Derek, Andrew, Lena. So we have 5 full-time strength coaches, and some of those other entities will also help out on the floor. We've got 2 hitting coordinators, and Then we have 2 physical therapists that work on site as well. So whatever that adds up to, I think it's like 14. Our Massachusetts facility is a little bit smaller. They do have three PTs in-house, a full-time massage therapist, office manager, my business partner, Pete, and then I believe 4 coaches. So it's, and then we'll carry an intern class at both locations. So it's a lot of moving parts. It's a big testament to my wife who really keeps the chaos under control at our Florida facility. And then my business partner, Pete, who does it in Massachusetts. We couldn't do what we do without them. It's very important.
It's incredible, mate. So what made you pick to open up somewhere in Florida?
Yeah, so it's actually a good story. We started out in Massachusetts in 2007. Had a lot of success with developing this baseball niche, and what we found was that there were a lot of pro guys where we would take good care of them, really help them, and they'd make it to the big leagues. And then when they made it to the big leagues, all of a sudden they had some financial resources at their disposal. Maybe they had a girlfriend or a wife that wasn't gung-ho about a snowy off season in Massachusetts, so they would often just start doing our programs distance-based in a warm weather climate. And it was something where I realized that we could extend our reach a little bit more. I was also honestly up for a challenge. My wife and I had talked about potentially doing something like that. So we looked at different locations. We wanted to stay East Coast. We wanted to be close to spring training complexes, just because it allows you to spend more time with your guys, especially if they signed with one of the teams that's close. So we looked at Tampa, we looked at Fort Myers, we looked at Orlando and Jupiter, and fell in love with Jupiter, and actually had some big league guys that were already training with us, who were already here, and actually met up with 2 guys that had an existing facility here that were watching over a few of our guys from afar for us. And we really developed a good working relationship, and those guys are my business partners, Brian and Shane, now. So we banded together in 2014, and it's actually been pretty cool to see. We kind of banded together as 3 strength coaches, and Brian has actually become a phenomenal pitching coordinator for us. He's really gone down that route, and Shane is the most unreal manual therapist you could ever imagine. He sees people that most people would kill to meet, let alone work on. And, so he's a super coveted guy. Actually is also the massage therapist for Miami Dolphins during the season. And then, so he treats a bunch of elbows and shoulders with us, and a bunch of, feet, ankle, and knees down in Dolphins land. But, we've pulled together kind of this synergistic environment. But, Florida really, Jupiter kind of happened by accident. What was key for us is we announced we were opening, and about a month later, the Astros and Nationals announced that they were building their spring training complex down here. So we went from having 3 major league organizations within 30 minutes to having 5. So it's been really, really clutch for us to have exposure. And that's where some of the biggest names in the sport have opted to live here in the off season, because they realize they can have just 2 homes instead of 3 homes. So it's not off season home, spring training home, and then regular season home. It's just off season / spring training, and then regular season. Certainly some huge state income tax, benefits to being in Florida as well. I know, Mike, you're in New Jersey, so you probably feel my pain right now, but it's a big deal, not just, for our athletes, honestly, for us as well. Those state income tax savings are what funds an additional employee each year. So it's a big deal.
So how do you live in Massachusetts anymore? Are you in Florida full time? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, we're Florida residents. We split our time. So I'm generally in Florida 7 to 8 months, and in Massachusetts 4 to 5 months. So we'll usually go up there kind of around the school year for our daughter. So it kind of works until it doesn't. Our girls are in kindergarten right now. So from everything I've heard, we've got a little bit earlier, putting him in a little bit late. Obviously, this year was crazy, non-traditional COVID, so we didn't actually go back to Massachusetts till the end of June, and then we came back down here. Came mid-October because I was in the MLB bubble for about 22 days.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 2020 has been very non-traditional, but we still do spend part of our year in Massachusetts. Believe it or not, my wife actually still has a practice up there. She's an optometrist, so she sees eyes, and her partner manages it while we're in Florida. So our life is absurdly complex. It's like a reality show, to be honest. But we make it work.
That sounds insane. So
it is.
How much coaching do you do versus business side of things?
Yeah, it's I would say it's very cyclical throughout the year. From October 1st through second week in February, I coach a ton. So I'm on the floor every day between 8:30 and 3. And So some of that is like, I'll do some one-on-one stuff with a few of our high profile athletes, but for the most part, that's coaching our pro athlete group. And then it'll moderate a little bit during February, March. And, and that's when I tend to do a lot more of my Yankees, spring training visits and stuff like that. So that'll be a fair amount of time on my feet on the floor coaching as well. In addition to kind of strategic initiatives, business stuff is sprinkled in throughout the years. I think, I tend to coach a lot less basically between March 1 and, the end of September. I'm in the past, I've been pretty involved on our college crews up in Massachusetts. A lot of the stuff that happened with just the state being more closed down in Massachusetts kind of made that not as necessary this year, just because our head count was down in terms of who could actually come into the state. So we actually had to turn away a lot of business because of that. It allowed me to do a little bit more long-term planning, a little business development, obviously a lot of the work with the Yankees as well. So it just goes in and out throughout the year, but that's kind of the way I like it, to be honest.
Yeah, bro. And congratulations on the Yankees deal.
Thanks.
That's when I saw that, I was like, yes, this is awesome. I was so pumped for you.
Thank you.
So I gotta say, I don't even know if it definitely wasn't your first shoulder product, but I have one of your shoulder products that I downloaded back in maybe 2009 or 2010 when I was at Pitt. I think it's called like Simply Shoulder or something like that.
Yep.
It is awesome.
Nice.
Right? It was a seminar you did. It was an awesome shoulder program. And I'm sure you've released probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 of the things like this every single year. You must have, how many products do you have now?
To be honest, I lost track. We've had product. Let's just say this: Robertson and I actually had a text exchange probably a year ago that were like, "Hey, some of these products we made, we should probably pull these." So we did actually, like Magnificent Mobility. I mean, we filmed it in like November of 2005 or early 2006. I think we released it maybe in April or so. And I'm like, that's just not really representative of our philosophy. So we actually went back and pulled a few products off the shelf, but there are quite a few that, have stood the test of time really, really well though.
Dude, that is so impressive. So I remember when I first opened up a facility, I shot you an email. I said, bro, you got to tell me what your schedule is, because I can't figure this out. Like, I have no idea. And you had everything regimented to the hour. I still, like, I'm a putz. I still can't do that. But I mean, everything is logged out. And then you're like, unless one of my kids decides to come in and interrupt everything I'm doing, then it all just becomes a mess.
Yeah.
How do you find the hours in the day to have the family, to do the business, to do the marketing? And I heard you on another podcast. You seem like a marketing whiz. You know formulas, you know this, you know statistics. It's incredible. And then on top of that, you decide, hey, I'm still going to make a collaborative effort to put this video together with this person. And I'm also going to be able to figure out how to do the finances between this product and that product and that product and that product, because everything's its own website, everything's its own LLC. Like, you're incredible. How do you do this?
I'll say this. I'll never forget a conversation I had. One of our baseball guys, he was 26 years old in his last spring training, and he got his wife pregnant, and it was a total oops. They're now some of our favorite, people in the world. We're close. They have 5 kids. And he came back after they had their first kid, and he told me, this is probably 2012, I would say. He said, I never realized until I had a kid how selfish I was. It's like, I always ate when I wanted to. I slept when I wanted to. I trained when I wanted to. I did everything on my time. And now I got this kid and I love him, but sometimes I just got to hold him when I have a million other things I can do. And it always stuck with me, really, really. And where I got thrown into the fire, we had twins. We had twins, and we had them in the same month that we opened a new facility. So our facility in Florida, the original one, actually opened on November 2nd, 2014. And on November 28th, Black Friday, we got a 2-for-1 special at Jupiter Hospital. And so it was just this crash course in like going all in on scheduling. And there was no way to do it any other way. And I think it was something that, we now have 3 kids, obviously, so that's extra challenging. And you just learn to realize that, as you look back on your life before you had kids, you never realized how inefficient you were, right? You went down like that. You watched the one YouTube video, and all of a sudden, it was an hour later, you watched 7 of them, and you're coming up with conspiracy theories and all this stuff. And I you know, I just went back and I looked and I'm like, how much time have I wasted doing stupid things, right? You know, arguing on the internet, on forums and things like that. And I just, you know, I kind of in that moment, I made a decision that I was going to, you know, I still wanted to be obviously a good family man, a good husband. And so I had to draw some lines. I'm still terrible at saying no, which is my fatal flaw. But I am a lot better about, like, you know, kind of regimenting my time. For me, like, mornings before my kids wake up are clutch. Like, I hear about people who like roll out of bed and go to like meditation and they have their morning ritual. I'm like, my morning ritual is a minute and a half, start the coffee pot, feed the dog, and get shit done. So because every minute before 7 a.m. is precious. So I really try to take advantage of that. And to be honest, I work every night after our kids go to bed. But you know, my wife and I, you know what we signed up for. You know, she's heavily involved in the business, so she's working on a lot of the same stuff. So, but I think you just have to regiment your time. You have to make time for training. You have to, you know, make time for family. It's like anything else. So, when in doubt, I always tell people, just like, do a time journal, like figure out where you spent your time, what you did. And, you know, are you willing to make sacrifices? You know, like, this is, I don't know, 2020, this is the first time I haven't played fantasy football in 20 years. I can't even remember, but, you know, just one of those things where life kind of pushed it out and I didn't do it. But, you know, I don't feel like there's a giant void in my life from taking it out.
So outside looking in, you know, I'm not going to judge another man's family, so to speak, but I can't help but notice how appreciative you are of your wife.
Yeah.
Right. It's, dude. And you know, I'll look at your Instagram, and every now and then I'll just see a random picture of her vacuuming or something like that. And you'd be like, hey, without her, everything falls apart. How, and you guys, you know, I assume by things like that you guys have like a great relationship and it's a working relationship and you guys are super happy and maybe you have your ups and downs or whatever, but how do you find the time for that? How do you, with all this stuff, now you have twins, how do you do it?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I don't think anybody would ever claim that marriage is easy. You know, my wife is amazing, and, you know, marriage is especially challenging when you work with your wife. So we go to the same facility, you know, 6 days a week, and we bring a lot of work home with us. And, you know, I don't know that we found like the right balance of where to draw those boundaries. You know, like, you know, we go out on a date night and we often talk about work or, you know, something like that. So, you know, I think you just need to know that if you're going to work with your wife. But, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm remarkably, I mean, I don't know if remarkably is the best word. I'm incredibly appreciative of what she's done, because in a lot of ways she stepped away from her career, you know, to allow me to pursue mine. And that's not just in the context of, you know, being the one that, you know, takes the lead on our daughters, you know, from giving birth all the way into, you know, 13 months of breastfeeding. But I mean, my wife's an optometrist. She went to 9 years of school.
Yeah.
So I married a couple $100,000 worth of student loans. And, you know, that was something she was very, very dedicated to. And she still does it. We joke she's team optometrist at the facility. And she's wildly qualified for, you know, especially in like the cornea and contact lens realm. She does some incredible stuff. But, you know, she consciously took a step back with her career so that we could open this Florida facility. So that's something I'm forever indebted to her, beyond just, you know, all the other amazing things she's done for me in my life. But, you know, that's a huge sacrifice. And I know I will say it's remarkably comforting knowing that I go to work and there's someone else there with the same last name as me that cares about it as much as I am, or as much as I do. You can never expect that of your employees. And it's, you know, even my business partners, they're awesome and they work their butts off. I can never expect them to care about the facility as much as mine because my last name's on it. And that's, you know, probably one of the biggest mistakes I made. But, you know, having her, you know, to kind of weather the storms and to work through the problems, you know, is incredibly helpful. She's a stud.
Dude, that's awesome. That's great. So taking it back, when you first started talking, you said with your warm up, you want to get guys into neutral, right? Guys will typically move better once they're in neutral. I tend to agree with you. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of instances where I'm just like, no, there's that, you know, famous comparison of, Michael Phelps standing there with his kyphotic posture right before he wins the gold, and then Michael Johnson standing there in his hyperlordotic posture winning the gold, right? So how much does neutral even matter? How much are we really, if there's pain, even if there's pain, does it even matter? Right. So what's your take on that?
I don't, you know, I think we have to define neutral. I'm not sure we ever have. You know, one of the things that I would say is neutral is probably inherently different for everybody. right? Neutral for someone with a, raging femoral acetabular impingement is probably going to be some different than someone who's got like this perfectly structured ball and socket joint and no bony overgrowth. So, one of the things that I always come back to is, do you have your normal motion and do you have motor control of it, right? So, Usain Bolt might be an active straight leg raise, a 1 on one side, a 3 on the other, and you might not want to touch that because he's the fastest guy on the planet. But as long as he has what is right for him before he goes out and does his thing, that's great for me. So for me, like if I have a pitcher who hops on a table and he's got 130 degrees of passive external rotation, but in prone, he's only got 80 degrees. To me, that's, that's 50 degrees of injury range that could possibly be problematic. So what I always come back to is, you very rarely will you ever run into problems if you add stability to a system, right? If you add motor control within an existing range of motion. You often can screw things up though if you stretch what's tight, right? If you add extra range of motion to a system, I remember Greg Rose always talking about the analogy of like, the chiropractor who's doing like business promotion and they go to offer to stretch a whole bunch of golfers out right before the first tee and they all go out and get hurt and have terrible rounds because you've given them motion they can't control. I've never seen anything wrong with providing motor control within an existing range of motion. I always say I'd rather be too tight than too loose. Because let's be honest, if you take someone who is out of alignment and you stretch them, a lot of times you don't know what you're stretching. You're probably just creating an element of instability, or you're picking a scab, right? You're stretching out protective tension that's there for a reason that may actually make them ideal, right? I know you deal with some super elite like NFL guys, like all of them have got raging anterior pelvic tilts and crazy tight hamstrings. Like you give them, stability in those ranges of motion, but they're not magically just going to develop absurd range of motion, and you probably don't want them to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I do now is I create awareness within that range of motion. And by creating awareness in that range of motion, sometimes most of the time it'll free them up. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you have someone and let's say it's a PNF, well, I never force a range of motion. I let them go to their end range, mm-hmm. they contract, and then I have them go to they facilitate the end range. And I just act honestly, just as a stop sign. I tend to agree with you on that. Brooker, you look like you were going to say something.
One of the things you mentioned about you don't want to correct the specific adaptation to the demands of the sport. Have you had any experience where you've tried to fix some of these imbalances and you've seen a decrease in performance?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. Yes. So I'll give you the best example. We run a college summer program every year. This year was obviously chaotic because of 2020, but one of the things that we do when we onboard these athletes is we'll do a full-on physical assessment, right? So I think the year before last, it was like 46 pitchers that moved to Massachusetts. So we'll do a physical assessment for these guys. We get a feel for what their movement looks like, go through injury histories, all this stuff. And then what we'll actually do on first day is we'll allow them to do a self-selected warm-up. So we let them go in, do their own thing. We want to kind of, observe them in their natural habitat. You'll get these, some guys who do like 3 arm circles and a little cross-body stretch and go in and try to throw 100, which obviously isn't ideal. But so we'll put them on the mound, get a feel for everything so we'll use Rapsodo. We'll get, pitch velocity, we'll get spin rate, spin efficiency. We'll see how some of their pitch offerings, kind of profile out. We'll get video on it just to have a baseline. And then what we'll do is after that first, 12 pitch inning, we'll throw some intervention at them where we say, all right, this is a guy who had, crazy limited knee flexion, or this is a guy who had really poor anterior core control. We'll throw some intervention in flat T-spine. We're going to do it all fours belly lift or some serratus activation. And we do that because we want to see how they transient respond. And you'll see guys that get on the mound and they get better. Like I've seen spin rates go up 150 RPM, with like 3 exercises between innings. But I've also seen guys get demonstrably worse when you add motion to the system. And the reason is very simple. They all of a sudden have these ranges of motion they can't possibly, control. And, God forbid you don't want them to blow out an oblique or something like that. But this absolutely does happen. And I think we can extrapolate that a little bit further. Like that's a very acute transient thing. You'll also see scenarios where guys gain motion too fast, right? So weighted balls are kind of like all the rage in the baseball community. You're going to see probably about a quarter of guys that gain a ton of external rotation, range of motion, doing an aggressive weighted ball program. And Mike Reinhold's got some good research that's come out on this. There is a acquiring external rotation somewhat gradually is an important part of a throwing program on ramp. So when you see these guys that sell out for aggressive programs with weighted balls, like in many cases, they acquire 25, 30 degrees of external rotation in a matter of a couple of weeks, and it leaves them crazy vulnerable to elbow injuries and lat strains and capsule injuries and all that. So yeah, we definitely have seen it. And then I think if you understand how to look at the research, you can extrapolate out where it occurs in other places.
Right. And then as you mentioned before, if you're creating sort of too much motion, the chance of injury goes up. So do you use like set guidelines from research to dictate, okay, this is within healthy range, or are you basing it off of pain or basing it off of pattern recognition? How are you sort of judging when enough is enough and etc.? You know what I mean?
For me, it's absolutely just the library in my head that's combined with what I feel on the table. I mean, you guys know it, like you can feel end feels, right? So if I say, hey, I want everybody to have 40 degrees of hip internal rotation in the supine position, and then you get that guy that walks in and he's got 80 degrees of ER, he's got these crazy retroverted hips, he's sitting at 15 degrees of IR, it's got this crazy bony, not so good end feel to it. Like if you want to chase 40 degrees of internal rotation with that guy, good luck. You're probably going to wind up giving him a hip surgery or tearing up the medial aspect of his knee because of the way you have to stretch him. So I'm very cognizant of making sure that we appreciate, I'll say this, I love outliers because outliers teach us so much. If you try to conform everybody to the norm, you're going to make a lot of mediocre athletes who are hurt. And I think baseball is notorious for trying to make everybody chase the same average. And we don't realize like some of these guys are special at what they do because they're absolute, case studies. They're freaks at some crazy end of the spectrum. And there was a really good study of major league pitchers. Actually, it was a study that actually looked at range of motion changes after professional baseball pitchers. Reinhold actually did this study. I think it was 2009. And they found that major league pitchers, I think, of the guys in the sample size, it was a bunch of big leaguers, they averaged about 191 degrees of total motion at their shoulders. So that's internal plus external rotation. But the standard deviation was massive. It was like 14 degrees. So you get a couple guys in that study, they're outside 2 standard deviations. You got one dude who's crazy loose. He's Gumby, right? You have another guy that is absolutely as stiff as a board. Those guys need to be managed completely different. If you try to shift them both to the mean, you're probably not going to make them better. You just got to appreciate that people are unique.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the weighted balls. I am so hesitant to utilize weighted balls. The way I look at them is they're an advanced procedure for an advanced population that has earned the right to utilize them. We have so many idiots having people try to throw these balls 100 miles an hour, and it'll get them to throw harder. Absolutely. Yeah. Without a doubt. Dan Paff says in this country, we are obsessed with stimulate, adapt, stimulate, adapt, stimulate, adapt. There's no stabilization and there's no actualization. When we achieve a new PR, it takes some time to stabilize that PR so you can actualize it later on. We don't care with these weighted balls. It's just, how hard can I throw? How hard can I throw? How hard can I throw? And you get these guys going from 89 to 94. Yeah, great. For how long? All of a sudden, rotator cuff goes. Dead arm occurs. Elbow starts occurring. Why? Connective tissues associated with those movements haven't adapted properly to those forces that you just exposed them to. Now, instead of a couple of throws here or there, now you're trying to do it for 100 throws, right? And comparatively speaking, the over and under training was kind of a ripoff from Bondarchuk's transfer of training, right? And what was he doing?
New. Yeah, it's not new. It's been around forever. It's like kettlebells, I mean, it makes a resurgence. So there's a lot there to unwrap. The first thing I'll say is I used to think the problem with our industry was the low barrier to entry, right? The lack of knowledge, the lack of preparation. And I modified my concern to be that it's actually probably much more of my concern is the willingness to share and promote when you don't actually have that fundamental foundation in place. The worst thing you can possibly have is aggressive ignorance, where you have to push it on a lot of different people. And Here's the thing that is just challenging. Throwing a baseball is the single fastest motion in all of sports. Internal rotation at 7,000 degrees plus per second. That's an insane volume, right? And we have people that, are basically living in that community who can't even tell you what UCL stands for. It's the most, backbreaking injury you can possibly have as a thrower, right? Is to blow out your elbow and miss out a year. And they're convinced that they have the solutions to that problem, but they can't even tell you what it stands for. That's a really big deal, let alone, what it does. So if you can't understand injury mechanisms or, the etiology of injuries, how tissue adapts, anything like that, you really don't have a seat at the table to even be able to discuss what is and isn't an appropriate training methodology. So that's the first part of it. I think, weighted balls we've used in some capacity since 2008. Corey Kluber's thrown them in every offseason I've ever worked with him for, coming up on a decade now. They absolutely can work. But you know what? Max Scherzer's never thrown in his life. And, one's got 2 Cy Youngs, one's got 3. Those guys, they've demonstrated that there are different ways to be successful. This is just, it's a little bit of a flavor of the week, but, if we understand how we can utilize them, they can be really advantageous. Some people can use them to clean up an arm path. There are different kinds of exercises that yield, kind of different outcomes. My personal opinion on them is, we'll generally integrate them after guys have already played catch for 4 weeks with a 5-ounce ball, just to gradually get their ER back, make sure everything's moving the way it needs to. You kind of always want to turn the furnace, on for the first time in the winter and get the air out of the pipes, before you start jacking it up in every room in the house and you invite everybody over for dinner. Like, you need a couple weeks to kind of get it moving in that regard. But, I'm really, one of the avenues I've really gone down pretty heavily is, a lot of the fascia training stuff. I think Bill Parisi's recent work has been outstanding. I know you've got a big manual therapy background as well. And one of the things that Bill talked about in his book, and I want to say it was actually while he was interviewing Dan, but they talked a lot about this concept of, if you look at a lot of other disciplines, you look at martial arts, you look at yoga, there's a pretty gradual on-ramping. Like, if you go to karate class as a kid, you spend, years learning discipline, learning balance, learning proprioception, learning, the art of movement before you ever get to kick somebody in the head, right? It takes a long time to get to that point. Baseball is totally different. We have the fastest motion in all of sports, and we let people go 0 to 100 really, really quickly. And we both know tissue remodeling takes time. Sometimes those pronounced fascial changers, Thomas Myers, all the way back in 2009, when I saw him in seminar, was saying that was 18 to 24 months. And that's absolutely verified by a lot of the stuff I've seen. Is you see these guys where you get 3 to 4 months with them and you make amazing progress, but you're like, there's more there. Whether that's how they integrate manual therapy, how we change their training program around, how they take a foundation of strength and, apply it to elasticity, power development, across multiple planes. It takes time, and I don't think these people are really aware of that. Like, when we look at these kids that are making it, we're seeing so many guys that were late bloomers. Yep. The kids that are throwing 95 at age 16, like, they're really not doing well. The kids that go to college at 86 to 88 with a feel of how to pitch, they gain 20 pounds in their first year in college. They gradually take steps and steps forward. They're doing a lot better because the structural adaptations aren't nearly as pronounced at a young age. They seem to be thriving nowadays. So when in doubt, slow cook them.
Bro, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, when I started doing weighted balls after I read Bondarchuk's book, Transfer Training, probably in like 2011. And I started flirting with it with some guys, and it was before anyone really talked about it. There was one guy that talked about it. I'm not going to mention his name. And I called him up. I said, "Hey, what's going on? How you doing this?" He goes, "Well, we throw a 1 pound ball, we throw a 2 pound ball, and we call it hotspot training." I said, "What do you mean hotspot training?" He goes, "Oh, well, it don't matter if it's your shoulder, your elbow, or even to your little fingertips. Whatever's the weakest thing you got there, that's what it's going to strengthen. It's a hot spot." I said, "Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness." I was like, "Bro, I got to get off the phone. I can't talk to this guy anymore. I can't imagine how many elbows these people blow out trying to do this stuff. It's incredible."
It's scary. And, the thing that's, I will say we're going in a better direction in some capacities. And I think there is a little bit of a lag time. So first off, I actually had Chris Camp, who's the Minnesota Twins team doctor, on my podcast recently. We were talking about just kind of the injury rates in baseball, and shoulders have leveled off. Shoulders are actually probably going down a little bit. at the highest levels. Obviously we're talking about professional, largely because A, we're probably getting better at taking care of them. B, we're less likely to want to do a shoulder surgery on a baseball player because it is a little bit of the kiss of death. It's much, much harder to come back from. So, that is encouraging. But I think, the other thing is the elbow injuries are actually flatlining. They've leveled off at the major league level. They're sky high at the minor league, college, and youth ranks right now. So part of the reason is, I think we've, to some degree, some of the arm care programs have just shifted things down the chain, and they've gotten the shoulder healthy, and the elbows become the path of least resistance, unfortunately. But what is somewhat encouraging, though, is I think that we have a lot more of what we need to actually assess, basically the risk at the elbow. We're getting better biomechanical, analysis now. It's becoming one of those things where you don't have to fly across the country and spend a fortune to do it. More and more teams are putting those in their spring training complexes. You have remote units where guys can get some of that data. You have Motus sleeves where you can, measure some of these things and track workload at the same time. So I do think that the technology is catching up. The problem is technology can never overcome stupidity. And it's actually scary to see, basically some of the stuff. I do Instagram Q&As, and literally this morning, some guy goes, I'm 7.5 months post-op on Tommy John. I'm 98 on my pull downs and only 87 off the mound. What should I do? And I didn't say anything, but I was like, you should book your revision surgery because you're an idiot. Like you're studying for the completely wrong test. Like your graft is not mature at all. Like you're prioritizing a performance goal when you should be just making sure that you're not still broken. But it's scary. I mean, I know you see it too, and in different industries, but baseball for some reason seems to magnify it across the board.
I have guys that I work with pro baseball players frequently. I don't have a ton of them. It's not like my niche, I guess. I don't know. But I have a ton of guys, and I get people when they're broken because I thoroughly enjoy solving problems.
Yeah.
I have a pitcher that threw 96 at one point, comes in at 89. Why? They're throwing across their body and they're throwing out here. And he has elbow pain and back pain. Okay, why are you throwing across your body? Well, it keeps it deceptive. Well, how much have you thrown this year? Not that much. Well, maybe we should stop with the deceit and focus on let's just keep it simple and go down a linear path. But these guys, they're I don't know who teaches these guys these things. I don't understand, but they're putting themselves at risk for injury for the purpose of a short-term game. I don't get it. I don't understand where it comes from. It's absolute lunacy, and nothing makes sense. Like it's for me to throw the ball there. Wouldn't it make sense for all my energy to go in that direction? But for some reason in baseball, no, you got to go that way in order to throw that way so you could get more movement on the ball or whatever it is. The logic of this just completely escapes me. How much of this do you deal with?
I'm going to reframe that, and I'm going to ask you a question. If Chris Sale came to you with his delivery 2 years ago, would you have changed it?
I'd ask you who Chris Sale is.
Chris Sale is the #1 starter for the Red Sox. He had Tommy John. He missed this year. He's crazy non-traditional delivery, right? Very closed off, incredibly east-west, but he makes it work, and he's pitched at a high level and made a bunch of money doing it. But you would never teach that delivery to somebody. Steve Cishek's one of our guys. Steve's got over 9 years in the show. He's 6'6", and he throws. It's not a submarine delivery, but it's a lot of, basically side bending, to throw from kind of like a lower slot. So what I would tell you is, to your point, we have no idea what healthy mechanics are.
Yes.
Like I've devoted my entire career to it. Ben Hansen, who's amazing biomechanist. We know very little. We thought for the longest time inverted W was the problem. Mm-hmm. We thought the Tommy John twist, guys who pointed the baseball to center field. Kyle Hendricks has a point the ball towards center field. He carves. He manipulates a baseball probably better than anybody on the planet right now. So we have to be very, very careful about assuming that just because somebody throws across their body, that it's more stressful. Maybe they have some level of biomechanical adaptation, that allows them to get there. Maybe they're a guy that they're across their body, but they get a really aggressive glove side. They get into their front hip really, really well, so they can overcome that poor direction. So I would say the only takeaway I would look at is you made a good point that you have to look at what they did when they were successful. And so we do a lot of reverse engineering with guys. Just had a big leaguer in town who's, average velo was down like 4 miles per hour. This year was really weird, right? You had guys that lost velocity just because there were no fans in the stand. So you were trying to like separate that out. MLB went from TrackMan to Hawkeye for evaluating a lot of the external pitch metrics. So we're kind of comparing apples and oranges a little bit with that, which, impacts like the spin rate, the extension, all these different things, how we calculate the spin axis. So you have a whole bunch of variables that are in play, but you always can look back and say, when were you your best? And, were you as healthy as you were then? Was your body weight the same then? Was your mechanics, did that work the same way? What about your strength? Were you more, high priority strength work? Like all those different things, you always can reverse engineer. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And sometimes it's really, really challenging. I spent some time with a, really, really accomplished pitcher this year, looking at, his delivery when he struggled a little bit, and, to the naked eye, they looked identical. And we talked about like, hey, it's not just positions, it's actually pressures. You're in this position, but how well are you using the ground in that point? Are you just drifting? Are you actually loaded in that point? So these things are so incredibly complex, and it's amazing. You go on Twitter and everybody has the answer, right? Just overhaul the delivery, fire Cressey, do all this stuff. Like, it's always entertaining, but usually these things are much more deep rooted. You have to go down a lot of different rabbit holes, and you have to figure out what the right mix is for each player. And it may change, right? That guy at 36 is going to be a lot different than he was at 26.
Yeah. 100% agree. Brooker, go.
Eric, did you pick to get into the baseball world, or did the baseball world, was it just luck that brought you in?
To be honest, it was probably more luck. So I actually, when I was at the University of Connecticut from 2003 to 2005, actually much more of my work was done in basketball and soccer. I actually always thought when I left grad school that I was going to be a college basketball strength and conditioning guy, because that was kind of my wheelhouse then. I ultimately decided to go to the private sector when I graduated, and just so happened that some of the first guys I started working with were baseball players. They were high school kids, and basically what happened in that first year is one of them won state player of the year. Their team won a state championship. A couple of the other guys went Division I, and my phone basically started ringing off the hook. That led to us opening the facility. And as we got further and further down like this baseball rabbit hole, and it, more and more guys came to us, I realized it was just such an underserved population. Either they were the guys that got like the foo-foo rehab programs and were told not to, strength train hard, or they were the guys that had just got like the classic football program, and they were, just squat, bench, clean, and everything will work out great. And we realized there was a happy medium, right? You could push guys hard, but at the same time, you could, throw the crap out of the med ball instead of just cleaning, or, you could actually teach them how to go from rotational linear and a lot of their sprint mechanics, because that's what a lot of the sports demand. So over the course of time that evolved, and, those high school guys became college guys became pro guys, and, word of mouth spread. And now we're kind of a one-stop shop, right? Now you have hitting, you have pitching, you have physical therapy, you have manual therapy, you have all these different entities under one roof, so that we can kind of deliver this, this synergistic experience to folks. I
mean, my next point is, how comes the private sector too? Because I always imagine you almost being like, I remember reading articles from you back in T Nation time, and you already talking about a lot to do with, movement mechanics and rehabilitation and prehab work. I always envisaged you as being almost like Morpheus, watching people move and just seeing all the problems that's going on with people. You would be fantastic within sort of the different franchises. Why did you pick the private sector?
I think I'd always had some entrepreneurial experience to me. I worked at a tennis club for 8 summers growing up, and I bought a racket string machine and learned how to string rackets and made some money on the side. And, my dad ran his own business. My brother now runs it now. So, I think, that had always been something that appealed to me. I enjoyed the autonomy of it. And, I think also I was always, I played, tennis and soccer growing up. Those are my high school sports. And I can remember thinking back, I worked so hard at soccer, and our team was terrible. And I always hated that was the limiting factor. And what's funny is our tennis team was terrible too. But in tennis, you play 5 matches. There's 3 singles, 2 doubles. So, you win 5-0, 4-1, 3-2, or you lose in the opposite direction. And we lost a lot of matches 4-1 because our team wasn't great. And I was pretty solid. I was like all state my senior year. and got recruited to play in college. But looking back on that, like, I think those experiences made me gravitate. Like, I walked away from tennis being more satisfied because at least I could control part of my destiny. You know what I mean? It was a way to kind of salvage something from the mediocrity that I experienced across. We had one, we went 6-6 my senior year in tennis. Aside from that, I was never on a winning team my entire high school career. I never went to the playoffs and anything. And so it was something that always stuck with me. I think to some degree, I learned that I could invest in myself and trust myself and work hard. It was it wasn't a knock on my teammates or anything like that. But, I think that was one of the things that appealed to me about business was I always, controlled my own destiny. I was also a very competitive guy. And I think sometimes when your athletic career, ends, I got into powerlifting as another means to have it, but business is competitive. I remember Mark Cuban, talking about that at length is, there are different ways you can keep score in business, but it is one more avenue to stay competitive. So, we compete with ourselves every single day in the way that we run our facility. And I think that's always been something that's kept me engaged and that I've enjoyed.
I mean, your business is fantastic and it's a huge inspiration. I mean, talking back about reading your stuff on T Nation, I mean, I remember buying Assess and Correct. If it was that was that the name? And all of these old digital products. I mean, you were doing digital based information products long before majority of people. I mean, you also do you run also certifications? I know you have a fantastic internship program. Is there what else is involved in your business?
Yeah, for sure. So there's certainly a kind of a consulting / product development, entity underneath it as well that we'll do a lot of. Haven't gone the certification route yet. We've actually talked about doing it in the baseball realm and even kind of done some preliminary planning on that front, but haven't necessarily gone down that rabbit hole just yet. That may be, a plan for 2021 when hopefully the world gets back to normal, because I do think that's an area where we can teach a lot. We have run mentorships at our facility that kind of trend in that direction. We just haven't established it as like a true certification yet. But speaking, writing, consulting, product development, all that stuff is near and dear to us. And actually, Pete, my business partner in Massachusetts, and I have run some business mentorships, mentoring other gym owners just on the systems and some of the things that can make them successful in that regard too. So it kind of goes in a lot of different directions. I'm not Justin Timberlake with like an NBA team and an acting and a directing and a singing and dancing career, but it definitely has a few different kind of tentacles to it.
Where did you go to college outside of your master's at UConn?
I started out at Babson College thinking I was going to be an accountant. I went there for 2 years. Realized I was way more excited about training. And so I actually transferred from Babson to the University of New England, did a double major in exercise science and sports and fitness management, and then went off to UConn afterwards.
And where do you want to go?
What's that, like in life? Like from here?
Like bro, you're a juggernaut.
You've done it all.
Yeah, dude. I mean, baseball and physical preparation, you can't say that without thinking Cressey. Like you're killing it. What now?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I kind of pinch myself. I joke about it. Like once a week I have like a moment where I look out at a busy gym where we're training some cool athletes, and I'll turn to like my buddy or my business partner or something like that and be like, how ridiculous is that I get paid to do this? Because it is pretty, I'm sure you do the same thing. It's like, I'm listening to, Eminem and guys are lifting weights and they're coming here for expertise. We have 10 kids from Yale and we have 7 from Brown that moved down here because their fall semester was canceled in person. So they're doing online classes and basically training for the spring baseball season down here. So I was busting their chops the other day. They were in the warm-up area. I was like, guys, you're all down here as Ivy League guys paying state school trash like me for my expertise. This is like a career highlight for me. So, but no, here's what I'll tell you. So business is fulfilling. I love it. It never gets old. And, I'm really fortunate to work with some awesome people. The only thing that it left me unfulfilled on was that I hadn't been part of a team where I was invested in their winning. So in 2015, a good buddy of mine, Sean Cole, he had been national pitching coach of the year at Arizona when they won a national championship in 2012. He took over as national team director for the Team USA 18 and under national team. So his job every year was to basically find the 20 best players in high school baseball in the country, pull together a team and then go and win either the Pan American Games in one year or the World Cup in the next year. So Sean reached out to me about being the strength and conditioning coach for that. And it was in 2015. And, looking back, it was the absolute most important thing for me in my career because, my wife was amazing. We had 9-month-old twins, and I got to go for, 2 weeks in North Carolina and then a week in California and then 2.5 weeks in Taiwan/Japan. But I basically went to, the Far East, and we won a gold medal. We beat Japan in Japan for the gold medal. It was just an incredible experience. And a lot of those kids, we had the 1st overall pick, the 3rd overall pick, the 7th overall pick. We have 3 guys out of the 20 on that team that are now in the big leagues, in their early 20s. But looking back, it was so important for me from a career development standpoint for 2 reasons. One, I was making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I was doing whatever I needed to do to help the team win. And it was actually awesome for me because it was a good reminder of like the importance of humility, doing your part. It's like the Belichick line, do your job. And I was in that moment, I was psyched to do whatever. And, I've nurtured some relationships from the guys on that team and the other coaches on that staff, and I stay in touch with them to this day. But what was also really helpful for me was it made me realize how much I did enjoy being having an active role in winning. And that was important to me. And I'd seen some of our, some other friends who had, gone into pro sports and seen that. So it made me open to the idea of getting into professional baseball, on my terms, where it wasn't. And it previously something that I was necessarily chasing. And I had turned down some opportunities just because it wasn't right for us. Fortunate for me, I had, around that time, 2015, I got to know a guy named Derek Falvey. Derek was from Massachusetts. Really sharp baseball mind. He was a young guy. He's actually a couple years younger than me, surging through the Cleveland Indians front office. At the time, I think he was director of baseball operations, and I got to know him really well because the Indians drafted Tristan McKenzie, who trained with us for a long time, and then obviously Corey Kluber was there, and Derek was very intimately involved in the pitch planning and stuff like that. So Derek and I stayed in touch. Actually went to the 2016 World Series, and he left me a ticket to see Kluber go out and pitch. And that offseason, Derek was hired, after 2017, Derek was hired as the basically chief baseball officer for the Minnesota Twins. We'd had this, great working relationship, and always bounced ideas off each other. And, he reached out and asked, hey, would you ever be interested in doing some stuff? And it was kind of one of those scenarios where it was the perfect opportunity to just feel out, what I could do. It was a consulting role. It wasn't a crazy travel commitment. It was, get involved on everything from, kind of like evaluating guys from afar to, look at some of the in-stadium biomechanics stuff to helping out with draft and trade deadline stuff. And, it was helpful for me too, because they had some really brilliant people in the front office that got a chance to spend some time around. So I consulted for the Twins for 2018 and 2019. And, Derek's a remarkable leader who honestly taught me a lot about building a winning culture. And he's done some incredible things in Minnesota. And, it really made me realize that, I enjoyed working in pro baseball. It was something you wouldn't even know when I was a consultant for the Twins. I wasn't someone that was like shouting it from the rooftops, but it was an important formative experience for me. And I owe them a lot for allowing me to have that opportunity. And sure enough, as 2019, wrapped up, I was approached by the Yankees to take on a larger role. And, my wife and I just, discussed what that could be, and worked with the Yankees to, kind of, put our heads together on building something special. And it's been a really, really cool opportunity, and also, challenging in a lot of ways that allowed me to grow and, develop in ways that I didn't realize I could have developed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Bro. That's so great. And I knew that you had the gig with the Twins because of Jeremy Zoll.
Yeah, there you go. Jay-Z, best guy ever. Really good dude. Yep.
Small world, bro.
It is. And, but you asked the question, like, what's next? Win. Like, that's it. We're part of a franchise where, everyone agrees that it's not a successful season unless we win a World Series. Like, if you even just watch how the Yankees, kind of carry themselves after we win a playoff series, we don't celebrate like crazy. You have to do something special to celebrate on that level. So it's expected that you're going to compete for a World Series every year. And that standard of excellence is obviously a much larger franchise, but it's what we try to, bring to the table with continuous improvement in our facilities and what I've always aspired to do. So it's been a perfect match, as an organization to tackle this with.
Now, do you go to games and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, as much as anybody could go to games in 2020, but yeah, I am in person with the team a lot throughout the year. So a lot of it actually, this time of year, we're talking obviously in November. There's tons of actually behind the scenes work that goes on in October, November, December to prepare for the longer term. And, basically connecting with guys who are, training all over the country and getting them, situated with good programming, good facilities. And not only that, the guys that are at our spring training complex, doing staff education, doing budgeting, evaluating free agents. There's a ton of stuff at work, but yeah, it's the thing you have to remember about this is it's a director role, and that's not meant to toot my own horn or blow sunshine up my shorts. But, I think the point is that you have to realize that in a director role, you can never have your hands on all, almost 300 players in the organization at one time. So my most important role is to be a leader, is to teach, to educate, to try to affect systems and create an element of scalability that allows us to, to make this work for years ahead, with all of our staff members that are in the organization. So I'm in person, but it's actually, just as much, behind the scenes. But I will say it was strange this first year being in I'd be out on the line for the national anthem at times, and you look around and you're like, wow, there's 50,000 empty seats here. I'm like, what would this be like if there were actually people here? So I'm looking forward to, getting back to some semblance of normalcy, hopefully in the years ahead.
So I heard you say one time, we might have been talking to me. I don't know. I forget, but you said, I asked you, how do you get all your knowledge in? And you said, well, books on tape are great. I'll if you brush your teeth 5 minutes a day,
yeah,
and you listen to a book on tape while you're brushing your teeth, and you do that for, 100 days, it's 500 minutes that you end up accruing. Mm-hmm. What are you reading?
Yeah. So first off, every January 1st, before my wife and kids get up, I write down all my goals for the year. And some of them are financial. Some of them are, hey, I want to have 26 date nights this year with my wife. Like some of them are develop this product, whatever it may be. I have a goal that I have to finish 25 books a year. And that's on top of podcasts. That's on top of, everything else. I'm actually sitting in bed as we do this just because I'm separated from my sleeping kids, but I've got a stack of like 6 books on my shelf. Some of it's business. One of them is a new periodization model. There's a Brene Brown book. There's Andy Galpin's book on Unplugged. So you've got like sports science, you've got leadership, you've got, personal development, and then you've got a couple training books / sports medicine. So it goes in a lot of different directions. On the audiobook stuff, generally for me, it's a lot more of like business stuff, leadership, things along those lines. I'll do some nutrition stuff periodically on that. It's hard to really listen to training books on audio tape though. You might get some good stuff from like a podcast standpoint. You listen to, Lee Taft or, Robertson has some good guests, those can be good stuff. But for the most part, I generally like read my training stuff and then listen to my other stuff.
Do you recommend any books?
Yeah. I mean, the one I tell all of our athletes about is Legacy by James Kerr. I think that's a great one. James Carr, I should say. It's spelled Kerr, but pronounced Carr. That's probably the best book,
That's about the All Blacks, right?
Correct. Yeah. Great lessons on leadership. I recommend that to every coach and player. Can't even begin to tell you how many times I've passed it along. I think Parisi's new book on fascia training is outstanding. It's a quick read. Really enjoyed that. Certainly like for me, the most impactful book I've ever read in the training world was Shirley Sarman's book, Diagnosis and Treatment of Movement Impairment Syndromes. I think that's one of those books you can go back and you could pick a random page, open it up, and it's probably going to give you a reminder on something important that you've forgotten every time you open it up. So that's one of those books that moves back and forth with me between Massachusetts and Florida when I do it.
And you'll read these same books over and over?
I'm not crazy about that stuff. I'll refer back to them, I would say. I can count on one hand the number of books that I'll reread. That's never been my cup of tea, but I will say, I had a good conversation with we have an athlete, James Marvel, who's in the Pittsburgh Pirates system. James went to Duke, super bright guy. Kind of just like he's the very definition of like a lifelong learner. Like he's playing professional baseball, but he's reading like, presidential biographies and things like that. And we were actually talking about it last week. And he's like, I used to be all about quantity. Like I had to finish this number of books and it was about being competitive. And then I took a step back and I I focused on quality. He's like, I take notes, I highlight, I do a lot of that. And I've kind of gone through a little recalibration on that. I remember, I look back and I covered like 38 books in a year, 1 year. And, a lot of it had to do with just like the drive to Florida and back. And I'm like, I don't even remember a single lesson from that book. And it wasn't just that it was a bad book. It was that I was trying to, factory produce it at, 1.6 times speed or something like that. So I tend to be a lot more pensive with it, and I'd rather get some good takeaways from it. I also my business partner, Pete's a really good, like reader in that regard. So he always, will highlight good stuff that he's picked up on. So we'll kind of, cross-reference what we've been reading and, throw leadership / business stuff back and forth.
Brooker, you got anything else?
One last question. What, out of all of the topics that you're reading about, what are you most excited about?
Ooh, that's good. To be honest, I've touched on it a couple of times. I think, how we create long-term, sustainable, beneficial changes in the fascial system. I think that's a big one, because as I look back, like that's probably an avenue through which we've been successful by accident, right? All the medicine ball stuff we did, all those Turkish setups added up over the course of time, like all the rest pause stuff we implemented. Can we be more efficient in it? So that's the first one. The other one, so we're using Proteus a lot more. So Proteus Motion is a company, was actually developed at MIT. And it's an interesting, kind of approach. It's concentric dominant resistance. It's a pretty big apparatus. They're working on making, subsequent models that are smaller and maybe a little bit more refined for home use, but we've been using it a lot. And originally I looked at it and I wasn't sold. Thought maybe we could use it for some objective measures of cuff strength. And certainly it offers that. We really started looking at it as a way to train rotation at a different point on the force velocity curve. So we've actually been doing a lot of pre and post testing on a lot of our baseball guys. And we're seeing some really, really interesting trends in our rotational sport athletes. We did some stuff in our college players this summer, and actually found that peak throwing velocity was actually associated with opposite side rotational power, which is really intriguing because Greg Rose actually talked about it with some of the best long drivers in the world. A lot of them were like right-handed golfers who played like hockey and had left-handed slap shots growing up. And so we saw it. It was like, it was a 3 to 5% difference on most of our college guys this summer. And what we weren't sure about was, hey, did we just test these guys after they threw a bullpen so they were fatigued, and that's why it was the case? We tested. We've had so many pro guys. Honestly, we've had so many powerful guys that we broke the handle on the Proteus. They had to design a new handle for us just because the analogy they used was it was like throwing a chew toy in with a bunch of pit bulls. So we were literally like maxing out some of the capacity on this. And what we're actually showing is that those numbers are even more exaggerated in a throwing population. And we're testing 3 or 4 guys a week that throw 100 miles an hour. And it's been really, really interesting. So I actually have an article going up on my website later this week where we kind of like recap some of the findings, but we're going to pull some of the data. I'm actually talking about doing a collaborative study with a little bit of this, once we get our heads wrapped around it. But it seems to show that, power on the opposite side might be a limiting factor to peak velocity, and that probably what we're getting on the dominant side is a much more of a measure of elasticity and an adaptation underneath the fascial heading. So it's something I'm still wrapping my head around, but I'm really excited about it. So I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, to piggyback what you just said. What do I notice with my volleyball players that go to hit, right? Which side are they more restricted on? The side that they go to hit on. Yeah. It's insane. Why? Because they just keep using it. So if you get them to do the opposite motion, you don't even need to work on the mobility. It opens up itself. One of the best power hitters of all time was Mickey Mantle, switch hitter.
True.
You know what I mean? Like being able to do things on both sides will just free up your body. Your body will only allow you to accelerate as much as it's comfortable doing. And if you're not balanced, it's not going to let you do it.
Yeah. 1,000%. I think what we're also looking at is like, how strong do we really need to be? What I mean? That goes without saying, but I realize I have these guys that have trained with us for, 8, 9, 10 off seasons, You know, we had a guy who came back and he trap bar deadlifted 415 for the easiest set of 5 on his first day of the off season. It's like, all right,
Now what?
I guess we're working on other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they do a good job of maintaining it in season, and that's where the Proteases come in. Like historically, we push those guys really, really hard with sprinting, with med ball, with change of direction, with non-sagittal plane plyos. Now Proteus is allowing us to train them at maybe a little bit more on the force end of the force velocity continuum, but still making sure that the resistance is in the plane of motion that we're trying to chase. So it's definitely been intriguing. The feedback from the guys has been really, really cool. To me, it works as like a perfect complement to like a Versa pulley, which, to me trains that similar point on the continuum, but it does it with much, much more eccentric aspect of it. So you're probably going to get a lot more soreness. With this one, it's concentric dominant, so we can train it a ton and not beat guys up too bad. So we're excited.
So you'll train them concentrically. The way I look at the contraction, the muscle contractions are the eccentric is the way to build, the concentric is the way to realize.
Yeah.
Right. So you'll still train these guys concentrically, opposite side, even though that's what needs building. You just want them to realize strength.
Yeah, I think that, it's learning to use the force that they have. But, you have to remember in all of these initiatives, they're never purely concentric, right? So if I get into my lift and get out of it, there's still an eccentric component. It's just a matter of how loaded, how slow it takes place or how fast it takes place. So, that's why I say concentric dominant, it's largely what it is, where that, basically tends to be the most helpful is it allows you to train things really, really frequently. You're not going to necessarily get guys crazy sore. They're not going to get as banged up. That's where a lot more of the damage is going to come when you add a large eccentric overload. So, for me, it's all about how can we make the training time more efficient. And if we don't beat them up too much, it probably gives us a little bit more wiggle room to push them a little bit harder in other ways.
Right on. One last thing from me.
Sure, what's up?
So one of the main reasons I went to acupuncture school is because I want to learn about fascia. Right. Yeah. That's what I am. I'm a fascial manipulator. By December 21st, I graduate from acupuncture school, and nice. I can, then I take my board exams, and then I'm a licensed acupuncturist. So I start manipulating fascia with needles. But they didn't teach me anything about fascia.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? Like where can I go to learn this stuff? I don't know where to read, what to read. Thomas Myers is like a thought. You know what I mean? But like, what do I do?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things to it. The first thing I would say is I think that's going to get better in the years ahead because the technology we have to evaluate it is way better. So best example I can give you, right? I don't really feel that much better after I get dry needled. Like it never has and maybe it's like the dry needlers I've had. I've never gotten off the table and been like, oh my God, that changed my life. I throw a cup and drag on there and I feel like $1 million. That's who I am. It's like slam dunk. I strained my pec in like 2004. I throw a cup on that sucker and drag it every 6 weeks. I'm good. And I know there'll be people on Instagram who hate me for this. So I can't wait for them to yell, but
the cupping especially.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not like, way down the rabbit hole where I need to have, 500 suction cup marks on me, but anything like that. But what's interesting is actually Sue Falsone showed some really cool kind of before and after stuff. She did a presentation. It was actually a collaborative effort during kind of the quarantine period where Stan Connie pulled together some different people. And it was actually, she presented during a thoracic outlet talk alongside Dr. Pearl and Regan Wong from the Rangers. And she actually showed like the before and after, like the fascial layers, like gliding differently after a cup ring intervention. I'm like, that's why I feel better. Right. Whereas dry needling is probably way more predicated on trigger point, and some people may have that and, benefit from it. So I think the response is very individual. The needs are very individual. I think about me, like I've been a competitive powerlifter or training like a competitive powerlifter for a really long time. I'm just dense, maybe it's one of those things where those layers do need to be separated more frequently just because, I'm pushing more things into one, square centimeter. I don't know. But from an educational standpoint, I think it is going to get better as this technology becomes more widespread and we see more and more people interpreting it and teaching on it. I think the other thing is, have you had gross anatomy in any of your coursework? It's life-changing if you have an opportunity to do it. I did it in undergrad, but here's the thing that was wild. You go in and you see a bunch of cadavers and all the fascia is cut away. Yeah. All you get are muscles, tendons, ligaments, and
those certifications that we get when we actually study the fascia.
Yeah.
But that doesn't come with our education. That's stuff we need to pay extra for.
It's true. And it's so important. Like I think back on it, I never appreciate it. I mean, don't get me wrong. You walk into a gross anatomy lab and you say, holy crap, I never realized the adductor magnus was so big. And wow, that sciatic nerve is massive. And look at that brachial plexus. Like that must have been the hardest dissection ever because it's coming in such a fine area. But there are also things that you never appreciate. The first time I ever sat in on Tommy John, it blew my mind because you see them do this incision on the elbow and they're feathering it. You got to be really careful because you got that superficial fascia. And if you're too aggressive, you got an ulnar nerve right there. There's so many things that you have to get out of the way to do a Tommy John, right? You got the intermuscular septum, you got the fascia, you've got to do an ulnar nerve release and bring it over to the other side of the upper condyle just to even get access to the point where you can even see the ligament. So I was like, wow, I never saw any of this on that cadaver. It was always cut away. So I think, that's where, getting into a really good gross anatomy lab can be really, really helpful. Obviously reading Thomas Meyer's stuff, going back and rereading it, in my case has been helpful, but, I'm still learning. And I honestly hang around my business partner, Shane, a lot because that's where he's studied the most. And, try to see these relationships like, all right, why are you working on that left hip if his right shoulder's bugging him? Like, what's the rationale for this? How is this working? And, sometimes you go down a big rabbit hole and it starts to make sense after a while.
Right on. Well, dude, we've taken up enough of your time. We appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure,
Eric,
man.
you're
Thanks
a leader in the field. Thank you so much. Massive inspiration for many, many years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate your kind words.
And stay on the line real quick, man.